I know you can't see it from here, but I literally added a whole brand new row of hooks underneath those lounge flies. 'Cause it's inevitable that we are going to be adding to the collection. Hello everybody, Nicky Marra here and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you've all have had a fabulous week and are ready for yet another fun ranking video. Yes, the channel finally returns to ranking of Disney animated characters, but this time with a slight twist. Now, while usually on this channel we rank characters one by one, actually I think we've done that for pretty much every single ranking video besides the ranking of Disney couples, if I'm not mistaken. And while usually that's the case for this channel, today we're going to be seeing double. In case you weren't aware, we recently celebrated Disney's 100 years of magic, ranging from animated movies to theme parks to cruise lines. And in that 100 years of magic, there have been so many wonderful Disney animated characters created. However, when you've been around for as long as the Disney company, certain characters are bound to have comparisons drawn between them. Whether that be from a certain outfit that may look very similar to another, to perhaps a voice actor that is behind more than one Disney animated character. But regardless, in the canon of Disney characters, there are a few doppelgangers. And so today, friends, I have created a list of 20 of my favorite instances of Disney doppelgangers, and we are going to be talking about each pairing from my least to most favorite. And for the purposes of this video, a doppelganger is simply a character that has either a lot in common with another character in terms of their story, their character design, meaning the way they look or their clothing or appearance, or like the majority of the characters on this list, they may have the same voice actor. Regardless of how similar these Disney characters are, they are all so wonderful as individuals, but today we're drawing comparisons. But if you're new to the channel, hi, my name's Nicky Marra and I am a Disney content creator. I got my start over on TikTok, but have joined the YouTube community and have been absolutely loving making long form videos for you guys, of which I have brand new long form videos coming out every single Friday at 5 p.m. So to make sure you never miss out on any future magic from me, be sure to hit subscribe down below. And likewise, if you'd like to find me on any of my other social media platforms, my handle is @Nicky Marra with 2 Y's and 2 R's. And you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat for even more magic. Now, before we jump into today's list, I do have some brief disclaimers and then conditions for our list today, of which I would highly recommend taking a listen to the conditions, because they might be a little interesting for this video. But as always, if you would like to just jump right into our ranking list today, then you can head right to this timestamp. First and foremost, for our disclaimers, I am not associated with the Walt Disney Company, and therefore I do not speak for the brand or the company, and any and all opinions in this video are just my own and do not reflect those of the brand or the company. But secondly, I welcome any and all opinions surrounding these wonderful Disney doppelgangers down in my comment section. This video is just purely opinion-based. I mean, there's really no tangible truth as to whether or not these characters really can be related. I just see a really big comparison in them. And so I just wanted to put this list together to maybe show some of you out there how similar some Disney characters could be. But thirdly, for the disclaimers, I do want to give a brief spoiler warning for all of the Disney movies that we are going to be talking about in today's video. I will be sure to let you know which movies these characters come from, and so if you don't want a particular Disney movie spoiled for you, then I would recommend just jumping on up to the next number on today's list. But next, friends, we are moving into the conditions for today's list. Today's list is going to consist of 20 pairs of characters. In the spirit of having this be a Disney-centric channel, I am going to require one of these two characters to be an animated character from a Disney animated movie. So this does mean that we can include outside companies like Pixar in this video. However, you won't find a number on today's list with 2 Pixar characters. One of them has to be a Disney animated character. Likewise, characters can technically appear twice on today's video if it's very applicable that they may have more than one doppelganger. But in order to make it on today's list, the pairings of Disney characters must have some tangible form of similarity between them. The majority of these similarities will either be with their story arc, their clothing, or with a shared voice actor. And with that being said, this video is just a list of 20 pairings. I am sure there are infinitely more Disney characters that you could draw comparisons to, but I would be brave enough to say that these 20 characters probably have some of the strongest similarities between them. But if you can think of any Disney doppelgangers that are really strong, I definitely recommend leave it down in the comment section. I would love to know what other characters you think are super similar. But friends, with all of those disclaimers and conditions out of the way, I believe we are ready to jump into today's ranking video. Oh yes, and really quick before we jump into today's list, I did want to go through the brief talking points we're going to be sure to touch on for each individual pairing. First, we are going to be identifying the characters themselves. Secondly, we're going to be talking about the movies in which they can be found. Thirdly, we're going to be talking about the voice actors behind the characters. And finally, we're going to be talking about the similarities between the characters. So 4 talking points: the characters' names, the movies, the voice actors, and the similarities between them. But with that, friends, we have blabbed enough. We have 20 pairs, meaning 40 Disney characters that we need to talk about in today's video. So if you're ready to jump into today's ranking video, then sit back, relax, grab yourself a snack and drink, and let's rank Disney's greatest doppelgangers. We are starting today's list all the way down at the bottom at number 20, who are Jessie and Abby Mallard. The first of these characters, Jessie, is a very spirited cowgirl who can be found in Toy Story 2, Toy Story 3, and Toy Story 4, with Jessie's first appearance being in Toy Story 2 in 1999. And Abby Mallard comes from the 2005 Disney animated film Chicken Little. Both of these characters were wonderfully performed by actress Joan Cusack, and as for their similarities, both of these characters are extremely quirky in nature. Throughout both of their films, these characters share a lot of really strong moments, both comedically and very deeply, meaning emotionally. And I think what really draws a comparison between these two characters, besides them both being voiced by Joan Cusack, is their comedic timing, but also their very deep hearts. But I will be honest, even though I'm a very big Joan Cusack fan, both of these characters are not really ones that I super gravitate towards. I do like Jessie a little bit more than Abby Mallard, and while Jessie is one of my favorite characters from the Toy Story series, Toy Story in general is not necessarily my favorite. And so the reason these two Disney doppelgangers fall all the way down at the bottom of the list is because I just don't necessarily gravitate to them as characters. Again, I definitely think both of these characters have a strong fan base to them, as they are very deep characters with a very emotional tug, but I think a lot of that also comes from Joan Cusack's performance. I really do love her as a performer. So yes, we're starting today's list with Jessie and Abby Mallard, and if you haven't seen either of these movies in a while, take a little look back at them, because I think you might find these two characters to have quite a bit in common. Next, moving on up to number 19 on my list, a unexpected but kind of delightful pair. At number 19 is Cinderella and Carlotta. Now, Cinderella, of course, can be found in the 1950 animated classic Cinderella, and Carlotta can actually be found in the 1989 Disney classic The Little Mermaid. Cinderella was voiced by the iconic Eileen Woods, who we actually talked about quite a bit more in my ranking of Disney princess voices, which I can leave up above. But Carlotta was voiced by Edie McClurg. And so I can already hear you asking, Disney Nikki, if these two characters don't have a voice actor in common, what do they have in common? Well, both of these characters are extremely kind and sweet in nature. They tend to take on a very nurturing personality throughout their movie and really try to do the most that they can to help the characters around them. Even though Cinderella is a leading character and Carlotta is more of a supporting character, both of them take on jobs that are normally performed by either a maid or a butler, with Cinderella, of course, having to attend to her stepfamily, and Carlotta being a prominent worker within Prince Eric's castle. And while yes, both of these ladies may have quite a bit in common with their overall work, what's actually really funny is, well, they wear the exact same outfit. Yes, as a little nod to Cinderella's outfit before she became a princess, when they were creating The Little Mermaid in 1989, they decided to design Carlotta's outfit to reflect that of Cinderella's work clothes. Seeing as Cinderella herself started off from very humble beginnings, I think it's very nice to imagine that Carlotta herself will one day have a gown of her own. Am I the only one that would love to see an entire Disney movie made surrounding Carlotta? I think that would be so fun. Regardless, I love both of these characters, and when watching The Little Mermaid, I love the little tip of the hat to Cinderella. Next, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 18 on my list, another unlikely pairing, who are Princess Aurora and Princess Eilonwy. Now, while we have talked about both of these lovely ladies before, we have never really discussed the similarities between the two of them. So what exactly makes these two princesses doppelgangers? Well, first and foremost, Princess Aurora can be found in the 1959 animated classic Sleeping Beauty, and Princess Eilonwy can be found in The Black Cauldron, which was released in 1985. Princess Aurora was voiced by Mary Costa, and Princess Eilonwy was voiced by Susan Sheridan. Now, before we jump into the similarities, I actually want to talk about the differences between these two, because That's what I think is actually kind of interesting. First and foremost, it goes without saying that Princess Aurora from Sleeping Beauty is an official Disney princess. However, Princess Ailonwy is not. This is most likely because The Black Cauldron was not a successful box office performance for the Disney company, and so I feel pretty confident in saying that to this day, not a lot of Disney fans know who Princess Ailonwy is. But with that being said, I actually think Princess Ailonwy is a lot more present and outspoken in her movie as compared to Princess Aurora. As we have talked about before on this channel, Princess Aurora is more so of a supporting character in her movie. Even though she's the namesake of her movie, the main characters are really the good fairies and Maleficent. However, in The Black Cauldron, the main characters are Taran and Ailonwy. And so even though she doesn't get the credit she deserves, Princess Ailonwy, I feel like, almost has more to do in her movie. But what makes these two Disney doppelgangers? Well, first and foremost, both of these characters are young princesses with very kind and gentle personalities, and both of them are honestly swept into magical adventures. Princess Ailonwy finds herself held captive in the castle of the Horned King, and Princess Aurora finds herself to be a pawn in this battle between Maleficent and the forces of good. Likewise, it goes without saying that these character designs are extremely similar, with both being light-skinned young princesses with blonde hair. And Princess Ailonwy's dress is actually very similar in color and overall design to Princess Aurora's peasant look. I don't know, in my opinion, I think these two characters have always given me like distant cousins energy. Regardless, I love both of these characters so much, and I can't help but be reminded of the other whenever I watch one of their films. But next we're gonna move on up to number 17 on my list, who are Madame Medusa and Ursula. Now, Madame Medusa comes from the 1977 Disney animated movie, The Rescuers, and Ursula can be found in the 1989 animated classic, The Little Mermaid. Madame Medusa was wonderfully voice acted by Geraldine Page, and Pat Carroll was the wonderfully iconic voice behind Ursula. Now, what do these two Disney characters have in common? Well, first and foremost, let's get the obvious out of the way. They are both the main villainesses of their animated movie, but as for the intricacies behind their similarities, both are extremely flamboyant in nature. They are definitely over-the-top villains with a very selfish nature. They both have extremely manipulative goals, and also very commanding presences. There are certain shots of Ursula in The Little Mermaid that actually look very similar to Madame Medusa, as while it is true that Ursula's main inspiration for her look was the drag queen Divine, in terms of relating her back to another Disney animated villain, animators also did use Madame Medusa for certain shots of Ursula for reference. In my opinion, the moments when these two characters really draw connection are when they're applying makeup. Again, being obvious that they are both over-the-top characters, Madame Medusa applies a lot of mascara on her really overly long eyelashes, and when Ursula uses the little sea foliage for her lipstick, I can't help but think of the other character. They're both so fun, so crazy, and so over-the-top in terms of their overall nature that I would absolutely classify these two Disney villainesses as Disney doppelgangers. Next, we're gonna move on up to number 16 on my list, which is definitely an unexpected pairing. At number 16 are Banzai and Ramon. Now, the character Banzai can be found in the 1994 animated classic The Lion King, and Ramon can be found in the 2006 Pixar animated film Cars. Both of these characters are wonderfully voice acted by Cheech Marin, and I know what you might be thinking, a Disney doppelganger? I mean, we have a really overly loud hyena and a car. And while yes, I am definitely not going to say that these are an immediate doppelganger that you think of in your mind, I do think that this is a pair that is definitely worthy of mention on today's list. As while, yes, they do have the same voice actor in Cheech Marin, who has a very distinguishable voice, but what draws similarities is they both have a comedic side and also a mischievous side. With Banzai being a villain's sidekick in The Lion King, he often causes mischief along with Shenzi and Ed, always having to follow along with Scar's evil plans. But besides Ed, who is just purely comedic relief and is the character of the three that is meant to be laughed at, Banzai honestly has the most laugh lines that you are laughing with. Shenzi's the scary one, Banzai is like almost the relatable one with the sarcastic comments, and then Ed's the pure comedic relief. And in all honesty, if we're gonna draw a line, Ramon is kind of also that energy. He has that little bit of sarcasm, but is also relatively outspoken and comedic in his movie. So while yes, you may not completely agree that a car and a hyena have a whole lot in common, I am going to put them on today's list not only because of Cheech Marin's iconic performance of both, but because they actually have a little bit more in common than you originally think. But next we're gonna move on up to number 15 on my list, who are the Sheriff of Nottingham and Chief. Now, the Sheriff of Nottingham can be found in the 1973 animated classic Robin Hood, and Chief can be found in The Fox and the Hound, which was released in 1981. Both of these characters are iconically voiced by Pat Buttram, who of the Disney canon has a very distinguishable voice. I remember watching The Fox and the Hound with a friend of mine and them saying, "Wait a minute, I know I've heard that voice before." So yes, even to non-Disney fans, if they happen to watch both of these films, I definitely think this voice is distinguishable enough to ring a bell. Pat is so talented and honestly stands out in my brain as one of the most, distinguishable Disney voices. But while the Sheriff of Nottingham and Chief both have a very distinguished voice, as we have already talked about, this is not where the similarities between the two characters end, as both are very gruff in nature and also have sort of bumbling personalities. They have a southern drawl and also comedic elements to them, but overall kind of have darker energy surrounding them, with the Sheriff of Nottingham being a villain's sidekick of sorts to Prince John, and Chief always having to chase after Todd. They can both be seen in a negative light, but that element of bumbling nature kind of does let audiences up on their disdain for the characters. Seeing as over time in Robin Hood, we learn that the Sheriff of Nottingham is really just a pawn, and the character Chief actually has a big accident in his movie, which unfortunately does not allow him to continue this mischievous energy towards Todd. It is an accident that makes Chief definitely have to step back and out of that negative energy. Overall, both of these characters are very enjoyable and complex in nature in their movies, and I definitely recommend rewatching both of these movies if you haven't seen them in a while, and maybe you'll notice a similarity between these two characters. Next we're gonna move on up to number 14 on my list, who are Prince Eric and Prince Charming. Now, while yes, it can be said that a lot of Disney princes have a very similar overall energy in their movies, these two characters actually stand out amongst all the others as having quite a bit in common. Now, Prince Eric, of course, can be found in the Disney animated classic The Little Mermaid, released in 1989, and Prince Charming can be found in the 1950 animated film Cinderella. For the voice actors, Prince Eric was originally voice acted by Daniel Barnes, and in the original Cinderella movie released in 1950, William Phipps was the speaking voice for Prince Charming, and Mike Douglas was the singing voice. And as we mentioned before, a lot of Disney princes have a very similar archetype in their film, as these two are both very dashing and handsome and fall in love with the main female lead of their films. They actually have one more thing in common, as in one of the sequels to the movie Cinderella, Cinderella 3, A Twist in Time, Prince Charming is actually also voice acted by Daniel Barnes. And so if you happen to watch Cinderella 3, which by the way ranked very high on my ranking of Disney animated sequels, you might recognize that very distinguished voice of Prince Charming as one of a seafaring prince as well. Yes, while these two characters don't have a ton in common in terms of their original animated movie and really just fit the prince stereotypical archetype, I gotta say, I love that that little callback moment was added when Daniel Barnes was brought on to do the prince's voice. I think that was really fun. Also, if you happen to check out the Disney animated short film Once Upon a Studio, there's actually a really funny moment in there where Prince Charming actually calls out to Prince Eric, and this is actually the voice of Daniel Barnes, and it's kind of funny because one of his characters is talking to a different character of his. But next we're gonna move on up to number 13 on my list, who are the characters Cogsworth and Governor Ratcliffe. Now, Cogsworth, of course, comes from the beautiful Disney animated film Beauty and the Beast, which was released in the year 1991, and Governor Ratcliffe can be found in the Disney movie Pocahontas, which was released in the year 1995. Both of these characters were wonderfully voice acted by actor David Ogden Stiers. And while yes, David Ogden Stiers did voice both, and that immediately draws a very similar comparison between the two, there are actually a few other similarities which you may not have noticed. Both are relatively pompous characters and are very self-interested. They have a lot of self-important energy, meaning like they hold themselves in a very high regard. Their image is very important and they are very controlling over a lot of other characters. But of course the main difference is that Cogsworth is more comedic in nature as he is a hero sidekick, and Governor Ratcliffe is a lot more malicious in this way, seeing as he is the main antagonist of his film. Regardless, I really like both of these characters and they do share a few common attributes besides their voice actor, so I definitely recommend rewatching these movies and seeing if you can point out little similarities between the two characters. But next we're gonna move on up to number 12 on my list, who are the characters Duchess and Miss Bianca. Now, Duchess can be found in the 1970 Disney animated film, The Aristocats, and Miss Bianca can be found in the 1977 animated film, The Rescuers, as well as its sequel, The Rescuers Down Under. Both of these characters were wonderfully voice acted by Ava Gardner, who immediately brings a very strong sense of sophistication to both of these characters, as Duchess herself comes from a very prestigious family, and Miss Bianca in nature very much, overall with her voice, just seems like a very prim and proper character. And so yes, as for the similarities, both of these characters are very elegant and very demure in nature. They are very refined with very sophisticated accents, but they both also have very strong, nurturing and caring energies for all of the other characters around them. Duchess is very protective over her young kittens, as well as relatively cautious in terms of getting herself into a relationship with Thomas O'Malley, wanting to make sure that her young kittens have a very responsible father figure to look up to. Likewise, Miss Bianca is in a relationship with Bernard, who is her partner in terms of her job, but she is also very, very outspoken in terms of wanting to help the young children in both Rescuers movies. Both are incredibly strong characters, and they both have a very strong sense of elegance throughout their films. And I think a lot of that can be tied back to the fact that Ava Gardner voiced both. But next, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 11 on my list, who are the characters the Queen of Hearts and Aunt Sarah. Now, the Queen of Hearts, of course, can be found in the 1951 animated classic Alice in Wonderland, and Aunt Sarah can be found in the 1955 Disney movie Lady and the Tramp. As for their voice actor, both of these Disney animated characters were both voiced by actress Verna Felton, and this is definitely not the last time we're going to talk about Verna Felton on this list. But yes, in their animated films, both of these characters can draw similarities because of their overall antagonistic energy. Both are older female characters in their movies, and both are very commanding in nature. Both feel a very strong sense of command over other characters. We see the Queen of Hearts ruling over her court of not only her husband, the King of Hearts, but also all of the card guards. And Aunt Sarah, being in charge of watching the baby and Miss Lady, also has this very strong sense of command as she is taking over the household. Regardless, both have this very pushy nature, and I can't help but immediately think of like the term bully comes to mind when thinking of both of these characters, which is actually very funny because I would not attribute that term to Verna Felton, the voice actress behind both, especially considering that she is also responsible for some very sweet and kind-natured characters. But again, that just goes to show the versatility and the talent of Verna Felton. Regardless though, I love both of these characters. The Queen of Hearts and Aunt Sarah both have very demanding presences in their movies, and whenever I decide to watch one of their films, I can't help but be reminded of the other character. But with that, friends, we have reached number 10 on my list. We are entering into the top 10 of my favorite Disney doppelgangers. If you have any guesses as to who is going to make the top 10 of my list, make sure to leave them down below. I'm excited to see if any of you can guess my favorite Disney doppelgangers. But with that being said, friends, let's jump into my top 10, starting at number 10, who are the characters Lady and Ariel. Now, Lady, of course, can be found in the 1955 animated film Lady and the Tramp, and Ariel is the leading character of 1989's The Little Mermaid. As for their voice performances, Lady was wonderfully voice acted by Barbara Luddy in the original animated film, and Ariel was brought to life in The Little Mermaid by actress Jodie Benson. And I can hear what you might be thinking, Ariel? Princess Ariel related to Lady, the dog? Well, yes. hear me out. In design, both of these characters have a very wide-eyed energy, as both are very expressive and share this very romantic and optimistic outview of life. And both have a very strong sense of adventure as well. Lady starts off in a very protected household, and so she doesn't venture forward, much like how Ariel is confined by her father to stay under the surface. However, when Ariel signs the contract to get her human legs, and when Lady meets the tramp, both journey beyond the comfort of home and experience a wonderful adventure that changes them for the better. And while both of these characters have a little in common in terms of their stories, if you happen to check out Lady and the Tramp 2, the direct-to-DVD animated sequel, you might be surprised to find that Jodie Benson herself actually helped take over the role of Lady. And so yes, if we are discussing the sequel of Lady and the Tramp, then we can definitely say that both of these characters can be attributed to actress Jodie Benson. Not straying too far from the path, we're gonna move on up to number 9 in terms of my Disney doppelganger pairings. At number 9 is Lady and Merriweather. Now, Lady, as we just discussed, comes from the 1955 Disney animated film Lady and the Tramp, and Merriweather comes from the 1959 Disney animated film Sleeping Beauty. Both were performed by actress Barbara Luddy, and while we did get into Lady's personality in number 10 when we compared her to Princess Ariel, she also does have some really special qualities that she shares with Merriweather. Both are very sweet and gentle. Likewise, both bring in a very feminine nature, where that very much stands out for Merriweather against the other two fairies. As Flora sort of takes on this leadership role, Fauna will take on this motherly role. Merriweather very much fits in perfectly in terms of keeping the trio together and also making sure to take care of those around her. Both characters also bring such a strong sense of warmth and kindness to their stories. And I do have to say, I think a lot of that is attributed to the beautiful performance of Barbara Luddy of both of these characters. Her voice is so special, and having two very strong leading female characters in Disney movies, it goes to show that she created quite a legacy with the Disney company. Next, we're gonna move on up to number 8 on my list. This one is so fun to talk about. At number 8 is Captain Hook and Mr. Darling. Now, both Captain Hook and Mr. Darling can be found in the 1953 Disney animated classic, Peter Pan, and both characters are actually voice acted by actor Hans Conried. Now, what is very interesting about not only coming from the same movie, but also having the same voice actor, it immediately draws a very striking resemblance between these two characters. And this is not the first time that this has happened. It is actually a long-standing history of the stage version of Peter Pan that both the roles of Mr. Darling, the father of the Darling children, and also Captain Hook are played by the same actor. The actor will begin the story in the Mr. Darling track, and as soon as the children fly to Neverland, in the time that they are flying to Neverland, he will actually change backstage into Captain Hook. This is actually done to draw a comparison in the Darling's mind between their father and the main antagonist. Both have a very aristocratic mannerism in their movie, and they're also visually designed to resemble one another, and so it really does create that almost Wizard of Oz kind of energy where the three farmhands kind of follow Dorothy into the magical land. And I think it was very clever and very special for the Disney animated film to follow this tradition with Hans Conried voicing both characters. So while yes, this overall concept of doppelganger was not originated by Disney, I am very happy that in the original animated film of Peter Pan, that this tradition was continued on. But I will also say it's nice to see Mr. Darling come around in the end. Next, we're gonna move on up to number 7 on my list. I know we already talked about one of the 3 good fairies, but we gotta talk about another one. At number 7 are the characters Flora and the fairy godmother. Now, Flora, of course, can be found in the 1959 animated classic Sleeping Beauty, and fairy godmother can be found in the 1950 Disney animated film Cinderella. Again, both characters are voice acted by actress Verna Felton, whose name you might remember from when we talked about Aunt Sarah and the Queen of Hearts. But whereas the other 2 characters were very rude, mean, and antagonistic, these 2 characters actually have a completely different nature that a lot of it is shared between the 2 of them. Both of these characters are very kind, matriarchal, and magical figures. In their story and as their arc, both of these characters also very much aid the main heroine in the film with their magical abilities. And it's with these magical abilities that they can guide both of the princesses to their happily ever after, with Flora leading the good fairies to help Princess Aurora get her true love's kiss, and with Fairy Godmother giving Cinderella the ability to go to the ball. Once again, with Verna Felton behind both of these characters, they are absolutely magnetic and wonderful, and I love that both of them just give a perfectly magical, protective energy over both of their classic princess films. Next, we're gonna move on up to number 6 on my list, who are the characters Baloo and Little John. Now, Baloo, of course, can be found in the 1967 Disney animated film The Jungle Book, and Little John can be found in 1973's Robin Hood. Both of these characters were wonderfully voice acted by Phil Harris, and Phil Harris being behind both of these characters is nowhere near where their similarities end. Both of them are fun-loving and laid-back characters who both also happen to be bears, and who both act as very loyal companions to the leading characters of their film. They also share a very similar design, and interestingly enough, there is also reused animation between both of these characters. And I actually did a full video on my channel going through all of the reused animation and audio in Disney animated films. And so if you'd like to actually see the reused animation between both of these characters, you can go check out that video on my channel. But yes, the fact that they could literally reuse animation shows how very similar both of these characters are in design. And so they have a lot in common, not only with their voice actor, their character designs, but also their overall energy and arc in their story. Both of these characters are so lovable and make such a strong impression in their film, and if you haven't seen either of these movies, again, highly recommend checking both of them out, as you might find a lot of very strong similarities between both of these characters. But with that, friends, we've reached the top 5 of my list of doppelgangers. I'm so excited to get into my top 5. At number 5 are Winnie the Pooh and the Cheshire Cat. Might be kind of a strange comparison at the beginning, but we'll get into it, don't you worry. Now, Winnie the Pooh, of course, was originally seen by the Disney Company in The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, which released in the year 1977, and the Cheshire Cat can be found in Alice in Wonderland, which was released in the year 1951. In their original appearances, both were performed by actor Sterling Holloway, who is yet again another absolutely iconic Disney legend in terms of voice acting, but in terms of their overall energies, both have a very calm and whimsical demeanor. They both have a relatively soft-spoken tone, of course, being voiced by the same actor, but that specific voice very much adds to their overall charm. They very much give very similar energy in their film, but I would say what makes them different is their overall story arc and the role that they have to fulfill. They also both have very dreamy imagery, especially with the Cheshire Cat disappearing and reappearing in different scenes, and Winnie the Pooh actually floating into his own dream sequence. Regardless, Sterling Holloway is an absolute legend. I love that he is the iconic voice behind both of these characters, among others, of course, but these two I think have probably the most similarities between all of his characters. Next, we're gonna move on up to number 4 on my list, who is a very dark and scary pairing. At number 4 are Monsieur Dark and Judge Claude Frollo. Now, Monsieur Dark can be seen in the 1991 animated classic Beauty and the Beast, and Judge Claude Frollo comes from the 1996 Disney film The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Both of these characters have the iconically distinguishable voice of Tony Jay behind them, and both of these characters are very sinister in their movies. The thing that stands out the most amongst them is their very intimidating and morally corrupt energy. Monsieur Dark has very little to do in his film, however, he is, I would argue to say, a very strong image from his movie, because he's that character that sort of sits in the shadows and has that low, gravelly voice, which is very comparable to Judge Claude Frollo, again having certain scenes in his movie where he is slumped down and in the darkness. But I will say, in terms of the Disney Company and these two characters, the order of these movies, with Monsieur Dark being a smaller part and Judge Claude Frollo being a bigger part, was definitely a pipeline for actor Tony Jay. It was almost like he got a test run in Beauty and the Beast, and that worked so well, and the Disney Company loved that energy so much that they wanted to feature it even more in a future animated movie. Regardless, Tony Jay's voice is so dark, gravelly, and chilling that it's, again, instantly distinguishable, and so I absolutely love getting to hear both of these characters talk side by side, because it's just so cool. I love seeing this energy appear in more than one animated film. With that, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 3 on my list, a princess pairing. At number 3 are Princess Jasmine and Fa Mulan. Now, Princess Jasmine comes from the 1992 Disney animated film Aladdin, and Mulan is the titular character of her 1998 animated film. In terms of the voice actors behind all of these characters, Ming-Na Wen was the speaking voice for Fa Mulan. Linda Larkin was the speaking voice for Princess Jasmine. However, the similarities begin when we talk about the singing, as both of these official Disney princesses were both sung by actress Lea Salonga, whose voice, by the way, is like perfect. Can we talk about it? It's oh my god, it's one of the greatest princess voices of all time, clearly, because it's behind two Disney animated princesses. But while I love both of these princesses for very different reasons, they actually have quite a bit in common. Both are very headstrong and independent young women who are both challenged by societal expectations. They both value freedom very much and both have very strong perseverance energy in both of their films. Jasmine is not about to be told her place in Agrabah, and Mulan defies everything that society expects of her. Regardless, I love both of these characters so much, and I think they're both extremely strong female leads, and I also have to say really wonderful vocal performance from Lea Salonga that just makes both of these characters instantly classic. But with that, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 2 on my list. Let's talk about some villainesses. At number 2 are Lady Tremaine and Maleficent. Now, Lady Tremaine also comes from the 1950 Disney classic Cinderella, and Maleficent can be found in Sleeping Beauty, which was released in 1959. Both of these iconic leading villainesses share a voice actress in actress Eleanor Audley, and these two ladies have absolutely incredible energy that deeply affects their Disney animated films. Both are elegant, imposing, and very regal, with very commanding presences and also very manipulative tendencies. Both of these ladies in their movies are very much looking for control, although on different scales. With Lady Tremaine, it's mainly just over Cinderella and getting her stepdaughters into very prominent marriages, whereas with Maleficent, it's more so harnessing power and gaining revenge over those who have wronged her. But yes, in terms of Disney voice acting, I think one of my favorite Disney voice actors of all time, definitely in a top 5, is Eleanor Audley, who has such a distinguished voice. It like instantly gives me chills, but I absolutely love listening to both of these vocal performances by her, and also her additional voice acting role for Disney, which was Madame Leota in The Haunted Mansion. Yes, I absolutely love the vocal performance in both of these films, and Eleanor Audley is an absolute legend. But I also love the continued pipeline that we talked about before with Tony Jay, as Lady Tremaine was such a successful villain in her movie that the same voice actress was actually brought back later to do the next princess film, which was Sleeping Beauty. These two villainesses are absolutely deserving of a top-tier position on today's list. Whew, but with that, friends, we have reached number 1 on my list of favorite Disney doppelgangers. Have you possibly guessed who they could be? Yes, my friends, at number 1 are Alice and Wendy. Now, Alice, of course, can be found in the 1951 animated classic Alice in Wonderland, and Wendy can be seen in the 1953 Disney animated film Peter Pan. Both of these characters were perfectly vocally performed by actress Catherine Beaumont, who actually not only did the vocal performance, but who also shot a visual reference for both films. That means she actually donned the outfits of both Alice and Wendy and performed the scenes out in full for animators to watch. And so both the characters Alice and Wendy were actually literally hand-drawn off of Catherine Beaumont. She is both of these characters, not only visually, but also vocally. And while yes, both of these characters are based on the same performer, the characters on their own actually have quite a bit in common as well. Both are very young and curious girls. Both of their stories originate in the UK in Great Britain. However, they are transported from that original setting into a very whimsical and magical land, with Alice going to Wonderland and with Wendy going to Neverland. Both of these characters share such a wonderful energy of whimsical innocence, and although very young characters, both are strong leading female characters that audiences very quickly fall in love with and become invested in for the rest of their films. Alice and Wendy truly have stood the test of time as young girls in the Disney animated canon, and to this day are wonderful role models for young children to look up to. I can't tell you how much I love these characters. They are both so kind and sweet when you meet them in the Disney parks, and with both of them having been based on actress Catherine Beaumont, it just goes to show how much of a true legend she is as a performer. But yes, Alice and Wendy are absolutely deserving of the #1 spot on my official ranking of Disney doppelgangers. Whew, but with all of that being said, friends, we have officially talked about 20 of my favorite instances of Disney doppelgangers. Thank you so much for watching. I had so much fun talking about all of these wonderful character pairings. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below so that way you never miss out on any future magic from me. And if you'd like to find me on any of my other social medias, my handle is @Nicky Marra with 2 Y's and 2 R's. And you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat in addition to YouTube for even more magic. Again, thank you so much for watching. I am having so much fun making all of these wonderful ranking videos for you guys. And if you have any suggestions as to videos that you would like to see in the future, make sure to leave them down in the comments. I definitely have a lot of fun ones planned for the next coming weeks, so be sure to watch out for those, as pretty soon we might be getting musical. But yes, again, thank you so much for watching. Stay magical, and until next week, I'll see you all real soon.